I paid for their party and left my wedding barefoot. If someone had told me a year ago that I would be standing at my own wedding feeling like a guest with no say, I would have laughed. But now I know that the biggest mistake is to believe that your family will let you live according to your own script. My name is Sarah, I'm 29. I'm one of those girls who imagined how they would get married since childhood. Not a princess with a carriage, no. I dreamed of a bright hall with floor-to-ceiling windows, green eucalyptus branches in transparent vases, long wooden tables without tablecloths, and a lemon cake with white cream. I always told myself, the wedding should be about us, not about showing off. When Tom proposed, everything seemed to fall into place. A simple evening at a restaurant, a ring without pretension. He was a little nervous and I thought, this is it, my chance to do everything for real. We sat down to talk about the celebration and I said directly, I want a small wedding, a maximum of 30 people, a relaxed atmosphere. Tom just smiled. It's your celebration, do what you want. I believed him. But in our family, a wedding has never been a celebration for just two people. It's always an event for everyone. My mom used to say, a wedding is about family, not just the bride. The very next day after the engagement, a new group appeared in the family chat. Sarah's wedding. It included my mom, my sister Lila, and 2 aunts. At first, everything looked nice. Emojis, hearts, congratulations. But as soon as I wrote that I dreamed of simplicity, it all came pouring out. 30 guests? That's half the family. It has to be big, otherwise people will think we're skimping. Fireworks, a photo zone, a DJ. Otherwise, the celebration will be a failure. I tried to argue. I don't need shows and crowds, I want intimacy. The response was cold. Sarah, you don't understand anything. Trust us, we know better. At first, I tried not to dramatize. I smiled, joked, agreed to see later. But inside, doubt crept in. Why do my desires sound like childish fantasies, and their ideas sound like law? I talked to Tom too. He remained calm, even indifferent. Don't worry, they want to help. But I couldn't shake the feeling that help and control are two different things. That same week, Lila posted an expense spreadsheet in the chat. The columns were titled Hall, Catering, Photo Booth, and even Carousel for Children. Seriously. My name was listed in almost every Who Pays column. The numbers at the bottom made me freeze with my phone in my hands. That evening, I lit a candle in the kitchen and sat in the dark for a long time. The only light was the flame and the screen of my phone with this table. I told myself, these are small things, everything can still be fixed. But inside I already knew. My day was turning into someone else's party. I'm not a bride. I'm an ATM with a no refusal button. And that was just the first call. The first month after the engagement flew by in a strange euphoria. My colleagues at work asked about the date and the dress, my friends sent me Pinterest folders, and my neighbors congratulated me when I went out to get the mail. I felt like a heroine. And to be honest, at first I even liked that my family had taken everything into their own hands. It seemed like they were doing a good thing for me. My mother called with the same commanding tone she always uses when she is in charge. Don't worry, sweetheart. Your aunts and I have already made arrangements with the restaurant. And Lila booked you with a makeup artist who has golden hands. I sat with the phone in my hand, nodding and smiling, even though no one could see me. Inside, I felt a sense of relief, as if a mountain of responsibility had been lifted from my shoulders. I thought, cool, they really want to help. I'll save my energy. Aunt Mary, the main organizer, created a separate chat with the suppliers. She added me, but most of the decisions were made without me. A week before the wedding, Mary added Anna to this chat as a volunteer at the entrance to coordinate guests and pick up small tasks. I saw messages like, this is suitable. We'll reserve this. Sarah agrees. And yes, at first it didn't bother me. On the contrary, I felt like they were taking care of me. Lila, my younger sister, was bursting with enthusiasm. She sent photos of dresses, hairstyles, and decor ideas. Look at this photo zone. Can you imagine how it will look on Instagram? She wrote. I replied with emojis, but in my head I was thinking, but I don't want a photo zone. I want simple flowers and candles. The first tour of the hall was like an amusement park. My mother and aunts greeted me with notebooks in their hands. I had barely had time to look around when I heard their voices merging into a buzz. A menu for 100 people, A stage for the host's special effects. The administrator was quickly jotting something down, and I tried to interject. Maybe a small wedding after all. They immediately cut me off. Sriracha, we're doing this for you. Everyone is expecting a grand celebration. And you earn money, so why save? I pretended to accept their arguments. Inside, I held on to hope. Maybe everything would work out. Maybe I would still be able to make my own changes. But the energy with which everyone got involved was like a blizzard, and I didn't know how to stop it. Paradoxically, I even felt grateful at that moment. Okay, they want me to have a perfect day. They're trying, I told myself. And even when I saw my ideas being pushed aside, I justified them. After all, this is my family. They love me. I didn't know that this love would very quickly become a tight corset in which it was increasingly difficult to breathe. At first, I still tried to contribute my ideas. I said I wanted a bright hall, neutral-colored tablecloths, and simple decor. But in response, I heard the same thing over and over again. You don't even know what you want. Trust me, we've been through this before. The main thing is that the guests like it. And every day I felt like I was being pushed aside. Once I said I wanted a small 3-tier lemon cake. Aunt Mary didn't even look up from her notebook. No, we need 5. And with fondant. So it looks expensive. When I suggested putting together a playlist of our favorite music with Tom, my sister just waved her hand. Are you serious? The DJ will do better. People don't want to listen to your indie songs. I started to catch myself keeping quiet. It was easier to agree than to argue. They convinced me that it was all for my own good. But it felt strange. I was like a bride only on paper, but in reality, I was the sponsor of a big party. I sat at the table and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It didn't feel like our wedding, but more like a status demonstration. And perhaps that was when I first felt a chill. Where was I in this story? That evening, I sat in the kitchen for a long time with my phone in my hands. The apartment was quiet, only the dim light of the lamp falling on the table. I thought, maybe I'm overreacting? Maybe it's normal for the family to decide everything? But every time I imagined the wedding, I saw a scene with decorations, food, music, guests. But without me. And then for the first time a thought flashed through my mind. Maybe this day was never mine to begin with? I always thought that the hardest part of a wedding was choosing a dress. It turned out that the hardest part was paying for things I didn't even ask for. It all started almost imperceptibly. My mother and aunts came to me with ready-made decisions. We've already agreed on the venue. We booked the photographer, he's the most expensive in town. Do you want cheap photos? I looked at them and felt like a student who was presented with a fait accompli. It's either this or nothing. And every time after their agreements, a bill awaited me. The first was for the venue, a $4,800 prepayment. I reread the zeros twice. I wanted to ask, why is it so expensive? But my mother beat me to it. Sweetheart, it's your day. Why skimp on happiness? Then there was the catering. The tasting was held without me, but they added 3 seafood dishes that I can't stand. When I hinted that it could be simpler, Aunt Mary didn't even look up. We can't feed people pasta. This is a wedding, not a student party. I transferred the money again. My account showed a balance of minus $2,300, with a payment deadline of by tomorrow. I sat with the phone in my hand and convinced myself, don't exaggerate. It's an investment in your own celebration. But the more I paid, the less it felt like my day. The invitations, which I hadn't even seen before they were printed, cost 3 times more than my annual gym membership. We hadn't even bought a dress yet, and I had already spent the entire budget I had planned on little things. And what hurt the most wasn't even that I was spending more money than I expected. What hurt was that I wasn't even asked. They just sent me a message. Sarah, here's the bill. Payment is due tomorrow. And when I hesitated, my mom always had the same argument. You're smart and responsible. We're counting on you. That phrase always made me press confirm. I'm no longer a bride-to-be. I'm an ATM with an unconditional button. One evening, I opened the bank app and scrolled through all the recent transfers. INV 2039 venue hall/due. 24H. Catering service/paid. $2,300. Music agency/deposit. $1,000. The screen glowed with a cold blue light in the dark kitchen. I sat in silence and thought, am I buying a wedding or just paying for a banquet for the family? That same evening I tried to talk to Tom. I showed him the bills and explained that I had already spent 3 times more than I had planned. He just shrugged. Well, they're trying. Don't make a big deal out of it. I felt a chill come over me, because I realized I was on my own. My family saw me as a sponsor, and my fiancé saw me as a sensitive drama queen who was exaggerating. I was still transferring money. I was still trying to convince myself that it was worth it. But each new payment felt less like an investment in a dream and more like another brick in the wall separating me from my own wedding. And that wall was getting higher and higher. Strangely enough, I was counting on Tom the most. I thought that if my family was trying to push me away, he, my fiancé, would be the one to say, listen, this is our wedding. Sarah has the right to decide. But the closer we got to the day, the more I saw him keeping his distance. I shared my doubts with him. I showed him the bills, told him about the arguments with my mother and aunts, and asked, don't you care how everything will look? He always responded the same way. Sarah, it's your celebration. Do what you want. In words, it sounded like support. In reality, there was detachment in those words. He didn't get involved. He didn't ask for details. He wasn't interested in what was bothering me. He just brushed it off as unnecessary hassle. I remember one moment. I was sitting on the couch, in tears after another conversation with my mother. I said to him, I feel like I'm being pushed away from my own wedding. They're doing everything and I'm just crying. He didn't even look away from the TV where baseball was on. You're too emotional. Don't take it to heart. And that was it. No hugs, no assurances that he was on my side. Just that cold, you're emotional. From that evening on, I began to notice something else. Tom became strange. He answered in fragments, looked away, spent more and more time at work or with friends. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said, just a lot of things to do. But I knew it wasn't just work. He had an old debt to my parents. They had helped him with his first business venture. He rarely mentioned it, but I saw how his shoulders would tense up when talking to my mother, as if he were a schoolboy in front of his teacher. And the more my family interfered in the wedding, the quieter Tom became. It was as if he was afraid to say a word against it and lose this safety net. I tried to explain his indifference to myself. I told myself that men don't like details, that they don't understand how important decor or music is. But the further we got, the harder it was to justify, because it wasn't about flowers or cake. It was about me, about my feelings. And he left me alone with my anxiety. And what's worse, I found myself thinking more and more often, maybe he doesn't want this wedding at all. This thought was like a stone in my shoe. At first, it was almost imperceptible, but with each step, it hurt more and more. I tried for a long time to convince myself that I was overreacting, that wedding preparations are always like this and all brides go through it. But then my best friend Anna joined the conversation, and after her words, my heart sank for the first time. We were sitting in a cafe by the window. Cups clinked. Someone laughed at the next table. Anna put down her latte and said quietly, listen, Sarah. I don't know how to say this, but I saw Tom. And he wasn't alone. I froze. What do you mean he wasn't alone? I asked. She sighed and explained that she had seen him at the mall a few days ago. He was walking next to a woman holding her hand. Maybe she's a colleague, maybe a relative, she quickly added. But it looked, well, not friendly. My mouth went dry. I tried to joke. Come on, he has a lot of acquaintances. But the joke hung in the air. Only one thought rang in my head. Why has he been so distant lately? At home, I couldn't help myself and mentioned it cautiously, as if in passing. Tom, a friend of mine saw you at the mall. Who were you with? He didn't even flinch. He just said calmly, looking at his phone. Oh, that must be Lori. We're from work. I was helping her pick out a gift for her brother. He said it so matter-of-factly that for a second I almost believed him. But the doubt remained like a shadow. I gathered my courage and talked to my mom. I told her about Anna's words about my fear. She waved her hand. Oh, Sarah, don't be silly. All men are like that. If you start digging, you'll ruin the day for yourself. My sister added, without even looking at me. You're not going to cancel the wedding because of rumors, are you? That's ridiculous. I sat and listened as they unanimously tried to convince me to turn a blind eye. And that hurt even more than the suspicion itself. Because instead of support, I got a brick wall of phrases. Don't ruin the picture. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. That evening, I lay in bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the cafe and Anna's phrase, "He wasn't alone," echoed in my ears. And I thought, what if it's true? What if everything around me is a performance, where I'm the only one who still believes in the script? I tried to brush it off, but I already knew. This anxiety wasn't going anywhere. It would only grow. After talking to Anna, everything seemed foggy. I tried to focus on work, on little things, but every time the word wedding popped into my head, a cold lump formed in my chest. And the more time passed, the clearer it became to me. I was simply being pushed aside. The family continued to make decisions without me. They developed the menu, agreed on the decor, and even assigned seats for the guests. In the chat, I saw messages like, "Let's put the Johnsons closer to the stage. And don't forget to order another arch." They only called me when it came to payment. Once, I accidentally stumbled upon a stack of finished invitations that my mother had left on the table. The rustle of thick paper, the golden glint of embossing, the relief ornament under my fingers. They looked gorgeous. But when I opened the first card, my heart sank. On the cover in large letters was the Johnson family wedding. And inside in small print in the corner was Sarah and Tom. So small that I had to look closely. I stood there with the invitation in my hands and felt a wave of anger and resentment wash over me. This was supposed to be my celebration. Ours. And now it looked like a family parade where I was just an extra. When I tried to bring it up with my mom, she just shrugged. "Don't be so dramatic. Sounds more respectable. And people will understand whose event it is." Lila laughed. "You don't think anyone will look at the small print, do you? Everyone knows it's your wedding." My words fell on deaf ears. Everyone had already made up their minds, and they didn't care what I thought. Tom wasn't helping either. He saw my emotions but just said, "Don't worry. Just a formality." I looked at him and realized, we live in different realities. For him, it was still my celebration, do what you want. But it had long since become alien to me. At some point, I began to feel like I was losing myself. That with each passing day, my name, my desires, my role in this wedding were being erased. It was as if I was dissolving among other people's ambitions and plans. And perhaps the scariest thing was that I was starting to get used to it. The day I had dreamed of since childhood had arrived. And from the very morning, two forces fought within me, hope and panic. I woke up before the alarm clock. The room was quiet. Only the morning sun was shining through the curtains, painting stripes of light on the floor. My wedding dress hung on the door in a cover white simple, exactly the one I had chosen myself. For a moment it seemed to me that all I had to do was put it on, and I would feel that this day was mine. But the illusion quickly shattered. My mother burst into the room without even knocking. Her voice was sharp, almost commanding. "Sarah, hurry up. We have a schedule. The makeup artist is already waiting, and the photographer will be here in half an hour. Don't be late." I nodded, although I wanted to say, "At least let me drink my coffee in peace." While my makeup was being done, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The makeup artist applied foundation, eyeshadow, and gloss. Much brighter than I wanted. I timidly asked, "Can you tone it down a little?" But my mother immediately cut me off, without raising her voice, but in a way that made it pointless to argue. "Don't start. The photos will be gorgeous. Trust the professionals." And I felt my reflection drift away from me. The image in the mirror was beautiful but alien. The hallway was already buzzing like a beehive. My aunts and sister were carrying boxes, someone was giving instructions, someone was rehearsing the script. The clicking of heels, the clatter of dishes, hurried voices. I tried to catch at least a second of silence, but I was constantly being rushed. "Don't be late, everyone is waiting." On the way to the hall, I sat in the car staring out the window. The glass vibrated from the music coming from the speakers, my heart beating in time. I repeated to myself, maybe everything will still be okay. Maybe when I see Tom, everything will fall into place. I clung to this thought like a lifeline. The hall turned out to be exactly what I feared. Dark carpets, heavy chandeliers, a space that resembled a banquet hall more than a celebration of love. There was a buzz in the air, the laughter of guests, the clinking of glasses, the clicking of cameras. People were taking pictures in front of the neon sign "Better Together," whose light hurt my eyes and seemed like a mockery. And then, for the first time that day, I felt it clearly. I was out of place here. I was greeted like an actress about to go on stage. People greeted me, praised the decor, and thanked the Johnson family for organizing the event. And me, they didn't seem to see me. I stood there in my simple white dress, holding the bouquet so tightly that my fingers turned white, and asked myself, where am I in all this? I was still trying to hold on. I smiled, nodded, and responded to compliments. Inside, I felt like I was watching my own wedding from the sidelines, like it was a TV show where I was just a random character in the background. And then, amid the light of the chandeliers and the hum of music, I felt fear for the first time. A bad feeling, like something was wrong. Why was this happening to me? They say that on her wedding day the bride shines. But that was definitely not me. I felt like everything was spinning around me, and I was standing in another dimension. I went out into the hallway to catch my breath. The air was thick with the smell of perfume and wine. And then I heard two aunts laughing. They didn't know I was there. It's good that Sarah's money covered most of the bills. Otherwise, we definitely wouldn't have been able to afford such a party, said one. The other snorted. The main thing is that she thinks it's all for her. Let her not spoil the mood. I felt a burning sensation. My heart was beating so loudly that I was afraid they would hear it through the wall. But the real blow was yet to come. My friend Anna ran up to me, clutching her phone. Her face was pale. Sarah, I didn't know how to tell you. But your family can't be trusted. They knew Tom was cheating on you. And they kept quiet. I felt my legs give way. What? I managed to say. She sent it to the wrong place. Anna whispered and unlocked her phone. On the screen was our organizational chat, where Anna and I had been added for coordination. Lila's message flashed amid lists of tables and deadlines. Don't tell Sarah about Lori. Let her live to see the wedding. Then it will all work out somehow. My head was spinning. All the pieces fell into place. Tom's aloofness, his work evenings, his nervous glances. And the worst part wasn't even the betrayal. The worst part was that my family knew. And they chose to remain silent so as not to spoil the holiday atmosphere. I looked at the hall where the guests were laughing, dancing, and taking pictures next to the Better Together neon sign. At my relatives raising their glasses to family unity. And I felt something break inside me. I squeezed the bouquet so hard that my hands turned white. Inside, a single question pulsed. How far are they willing to go to keep me as a silent bride? I walked out into the hall feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wanted to run away, rip off my dress, stop this circus, but my legs carried me forward. The guests were already seated at the tables, the music was blaring, and the heavy bass reverberated in my chest. I looked for Tom with my eyes and found him. He was standing next to his friend, laughing, a glass of champagne in his hand. I looked at him and saw a man who knew that the truth could explode at any moment. And yet he stood there as if nothing had happened. And then began what I now call my death on live TV. One of the guests, already quite drunk, raised his glass and shouted loudly for everyone to hear. To Tom and to his two queens of the evening. Laughter erupted around us, short, predatory, like in a herd. Some people covered their mouths with their hands, others pretended not to hear. But I saw that many knew. And that laughter was like a knife in my back. I froze. For a moment there was silence for me. Except for my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. I looked at my mother, she looked away. My aunts lowered their heads. Lila was frantically typing something on her phone. No one was in a hurry to stop the farce. Someone coughed quietly with relief. Another smiled nervously and turned away. And Tom? He just smiled awkwardly and couldn't say a word in my defense. He waved his hand as if it were a bad joke and turned to his friend to hide behind his laughter. Not a single gesture of support in my direction. Not a glance, not an attempt to stand up and say a few words. I felt my face burning. Every person in the room, relatives, friends, colleagues, was looking not at the happy bride, but at the woman who had just been laughed at. I was shaking. The bouquet slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a thud. The silence that followed the impact was even deeper than the laughter before. Instead, somewhere behind the hall, another burst of laughter, less polite this time, rang out. Something inside me snapped. I could no longer stand quietly. I picked up the bouquet from the floor, but not to hold it again. I threw it onto the nearest table. The glasses clinked from the impact, and a few drops of wine spilled onto the tablecloth. And I walked to the center of the hall. The buzz died down. All conversations stopped. Hundreds of eyes were on me, and for the first time that day, I felt that now it was my turn to speak. I was trembling, but my voice was clear, ringing in the microphone silence. Enough. This is not my wedding. This is your party. With my money. And based on your lies. The hall was filled with a silence you could cut with a knife. The host, who was about to make a toast, froze with the cards in his hands, not knowing where to look. I saw my mother's dilated pupils, Tom's confused face, my aunt's frightened glances. I continued, almost unable to control where the strength was coming from. You knew about his betrayals. You knew and you kept quiet. You lied to me so as not to spoil your image. And now you laugh in my face. A muffled whisper swept through the hall. Someone tried to quiet their neighbor. Someone took out their phone and started filming. I could see the red dot of the camera flashing right in my eyes. I am not a decoration for your banquet. I am not an ATM for your whims. And I am not someone who will turn a blind eye to betrayal because it's easier that way. You've put on your show. But I'm not playing in it anymore. Several people at the tables lowered their heads. Someone in the corner suddenly applauded quietly, as if supporting me, and that sound was sharper than any laughter. Some of the guests who didn't know about the story with Tom now looked at him with open condemnation. Tom tried to open his mouth, but I raised my hand. Don't you dare. You kept quiet when everyone was laughing. Now keep quiet. I was trembling, my hands were white, but a strange confidence was growing inside me. For the first time in a long time, I was saying out loud what I had been carrying inside me for months. You wanted this wedding to be for everyone? Fine. Then let everyone know the truth. Let everyone see what really happened. I scanned the room, phones, confused faces, silence that now belonged to me. And I realized there was no turning back. After my words, the hall exploded, but not with applause but with chaos. Some people started talking, some stared, and several people immediately reached for their phones. A depressing silence hung in the air, broken by the hum of whispers and the clicking of cameras. Mom was the first to run up to me. There was panic in her voice, but not maternal panic, fear of losing control. Sarah, please stop. Don't ruin your day. We'll sort everything out. I look at her and see a different woman. Not the one who held my hand as a child, but the one who is afraid of ruining the show. Her eyes dart around, she fumbles for her phone in her purse, as if looking for a plan to fix everything. Aunt Mary tries to smooth things over. All weddings have their difficulties. Don't take it out on people, we'll talk tomorrow. Lila stands to the side and smiles nervously, whispering, Sarah, be smart. The guests are watching. Her smile is thin, a stretched thread. She is more afraid of gossip than she is of me. And that's why I'm saying it, so that everyone can see. I looked at Tom. He sat with his head down, his fingers nervously tapping the rim of his glass. When I said his name, he looked up and muttered quietly, almost in a driven voice, This is an exaggeration. We can work it out. His voice sounded pitiful, not remorse but fear. I was waiting for at least a hint of an apology, at least one sincere attempt to defend me. Nothing. Just a desire to get out of it unscathed. Whispers spread through the room. Someone whispered, She's right. Someone clapped their hands over their mouth. One of my friends had already gotten up from her seat, and I could see from her face that she was coming straight for me. Several guests took out their phones. The red recording dot lit up next to their faces. My family tried to interrupt me, to force an explanation, but their voices were barely audible. Tom hid behind silence, my mother fidgeted, my aunts tried to find the right words. And at that moment I felt that I was finally standing above them all. I said only one thing, in a voice that sounded bitter and clear. There's nothing to save. This was never my celebration. Silence fell again in the hall, But it was a different kind of silence. Not the kind they knew how to create for show, but a silence that belonged to me. Deep, full of weight and finality. I took off my veil. I unfastened the pins and placed it on the nearest table next to an unfinished glass of wine. The fabric slowly slid off the table, like a weight I had been carrying. Everyone looked at me as if I had just committed sacrilege. For them, it was a symbol of the bride. For me, it was a shackle. I moved between the tables. My footsteps echoed on the carpet, and I could hear the guests parting. Someone whispered, "My God, how daring!" Others lowered their eyes to their plates, hiding behind their glasses so as not to meet my gaze. At the exit, my mother grabbed my arm. Her fingers were ice cold, her grip nervous. "Sarah, think. People will say you ruined everything. You'll regret it." I gently pulled my hand away, looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time in my life said what I felt. "No, Mom. You ruined everything. I just finally told the truth." I opened the door. The silence of the hall was replaced by the noise of the street, the rumble of cars, the breath of night air, crickets somewhere in the darkness. The world outside the door was simpler and more real. I took a deep breath for the first time that day. A few seconds later, the door opened again. Anna came out and silently hugged me. Then others joined in. A friend from college, a colleague from work, even two guests I didn't know very well. One of them said, "You did the right thing. Let's go." We set off together. I walked barefoot, holding my shoes in my hands, and I felt not sadness but a strange lightness. It was as if, for the first time in a long time, I no longer had to play a role. Behind me were the music, laughter, and conspiracy of silence. The whole performance they called my wedding. Ahead of me was the unknown, but it was finally mine. I spent the first few days after the wedding as if I had come to my senses after an accident. Silence rang in my head, and dozens of unread messages from my family accumulated on my phone. I didn't even open them. I just deleted them one by one like pulling out thorns. I rented a small apartment in another neighborhood. It was a one-room apartment with old parquet flooring and a small balcony. But when I brought my boxes there for the first time, I felt that this was my space. No strangers' voices, no commands to trust us. I could decide everything myself, even where to put the kettle. I started therapy almost immediately. At my first meeting with the psychologist, I was silent almost the entire time. Only at the end was I able to say, "I feel like I've been erased from my own life." She nodded and said, "And now we're going to bring you back to yourself." Those words became a turning point for me. I changed jobs. I didn't want to catch the glances of my colleagues every day and explain why I wasn't married after the lavish wedding. I found another company in a new city, far away from all those eyes. There I was just Sarah, not the one whose wedding fell through. In my new apartment, I began to rebuild myself from scratch. I bought a houseplant and checked every evening to see if it had wilted. I wore my favorite baggy sweaters at home, cooked simple meals, and listened to music I chose myself. Every little thing. A cup of tea, a new towel, even the lamp by my bed reminded me, this is mine. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night feeling guilty, as if I had to go back and explain myself, make peace. And every time I picked up the phone to look at my family's numbers, I saw the scene in the hall before my eyes. Laughter, averted glances, silence instead of support. I put the phone back on the nightstand. And then came my first real no's. I refused to attend the family reconciliation dinner, to which I had been invited through acquaintances. I returned the deposit for the joint loan that my mother had managed to take out in my name so that all expenses would be easier to control. And with each no, I felt my breathing become more even. I realized a simple thing. The wedding was supposed to be the beginning, but it was the end. The end of my naivety, trust, and the illusion that family always chooses you. They chose the image, and I chose myself. This choice hurt, but it was the first right decision in many years. A year has passed since that evening when I took off my veil and walked out of the hall barefoot. A year without my mother's calls with advice, without Lila's expense tables, without Tom, who was always too busy. A year of silence. And it was in this silence that I began to truly live for the first time. I rented a small space in the city center. Not for a wedding, not for a performance, but for myself. The white walls were decorated with my photographs and drawings, which I had hidden in drawers for years. On the tables were candles, eucalyptus branches, and books that smelled of fresh paper. I called this place a celebration for myself, and threw a party there to celebrate my housewarming. Friends, colleagues, and even a few new acquaintances came. People who saw me not as a wallet or a decoration, but as a person. We laughed, listened to music, and ate lemon cake with white cream. And I felt this is it. What I had dreamed of since childhood. Simple. Bright. Honest. When I raised my glass, I didn't have a prepared speech in my head. I just said what had become my 3 pillars. I called things by their names, and I no longer keep silent about betrayal or lies. I chose myself. I moved, changed jobs, and started a life without other people's instructions. And I created my own celebration. Not for show, but for those who are truly close to me. The words were simple, but the audience applauded as if it were the most sincere truth. A wave of calm washed over me. Not euphoria, not anger, not resentment, but pure peace inside. I looked at the people around me and realized, now I am not a shadow, not a backdrop, not a resource. I am the main character in my own story. And if someone ever asks me, what was your wedding like? I will answer, it was the day I said no to other people's scripts and yes to myself.